Yeah, I've thought a little bit about this. I've wondered sometimes if the ideas that we think that we develop, they seem to just come to us, in a sense. It seems almost like that's just as accurate a way to think about it as us actually developing it, like we own it. But I kind of think that it's just as accurate to say that ideas own us. Like when I think of...
Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost podcast. Today I'm excited to bring your way an inventor who goes by the name Jordan Miller. Today we're going to be talking about the philosophy of creativity from idea to creation. Jordan, hi. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Do you want to tell us about yourself briefly as we begin our conversation?
Sure. So I'm the founder of a crypto AI project called Satori. And Satori is a future predicting network. So it's a future oracle, and it's all about decentralized AI. That's what we're trying to do at Satori.
Wow, that's amazing. That looks like a very unique invention that you are working on. So how has it been? Tell us about what inspired this creation of yours and how far along you've come.
Well, I've always been interested in intelligence as such. So I studied a lot about the brain and how to, I was interested in the brain because I wanted to know, how does the brain generate intelligence? Or how is it instantiated in our brain? If I could know that, then I thought that's probably the best way to know how to put it into computers, how to model it in a machine. And so I was interested in that growing up. I started working on this project, though, about 2 years ago. And by that time, I had kind of realized that it's very complex how the brain works, but one of the very simplest, most basic things it does is try to predict the future. And I thought, it's doing that all the time, everywhere, all at once. So it's doing it on our subconscious level. Like every region of our brain is trying to predict what it's going to experience in the near future. And so this prediction of the future is one of the things, it's probably the main thing that gives our brain its ability to be really efficient. And kind of when I realized that, I thought, well, we have technologies today that can just do that. We can start doing this, and we can do it in an automated fashion. We don't need a lot of humans to do that. We don't need human labor to build these kind of predictive models. We can automate that process. And I thought, why don't we? We could make a network that watches the entire world and predicts the future of everything. We could start with that as a kind of a bottom layer to the technology stack of intelligence on the web. So that's kind of what I've been building.
Wow, that sounds really deep. And the reason why I brought you on this show is because when I met you, I got, captivated by your vision, your imagination, and the sheer fact that you started this idea and you've been able to bring it through, even though you did not have any investment, so to say, or any special influx of cash, but you've been able to make that idea at least come alive to the state that it is now. Can you tell me how you were able to pull that off? Because I've met a lot of creatives or potential creatives who never get their ideas off the ground. And one of the things they say holds them back is that, they did not have support, they did not have cash, they did not have capital, they did not have investors. So how did you pull that up?
Well, there are some things you can't do without cash or investors and stuff, but there's a lot that you can do without them. Especially, if you can program, if you can code, then you can, do that. If programming's cool. And in fact, when I was in middle school, high school, I decided I wanted to learn some kind of skill, and I was attracted to programming because I realized if you can say it, then you can make it real with programming. With talking to computers, you can make it real. You don't have to convince anybody. You don't have to get anybody on board. You don't have to go out and source material. Like, if you're a carpenter, you got to use wood. If you're building things in the real world, but if you're building things in the idea space, then all you're using is language. And so I was very attracted to that. And so doing something like this just on your own, I feel like you can get very far if you're a programmer, if the space in which you're working is programming. So about 2 years ago, I had this idea about 10 years ago. Back right when I heard of blockchain, I saw its potential as kind of, this can bring together a worldwide network, an open, distributed worldwide network that we could instantiate my idea of future predicting AI bots. And I thought, we could do that. And so I actually attempted to do it way back in like 2013 and 14. And I did not have the expertise to realize that my vision of the implementation at that time was too complex. And so what I was trying to do was bake in the idea, the AI algorithm, into the blockchain consensus mechanism itself, and that was just way too hard. And that was kind of because I was a purist. I wanted it to be very pure, purely distributed, purely, and it's just too hard to build that from the bottom up. And so what I had to do was take a step back from the idea and go continue to level up my programming skills and understand, how this thing might be able to work in the future. And about 2 years ago, I felt like I now could see a new way forward. And I didn't go out and try to get investment or anything. I just said, okay, I can work on this nights and weekends, and I can be consistent, or as consistent as I can be. And I can probably get to the point, I can build lots of this kind of myself, and some of it I don't know how to build, but I can learn. And I felt like I would eventually be able to get to the point where I have a prototypical MVP. And I thought, if I can get there, then I can show it to people. Instead of telling them about it and, trying to convince them and, going into math or whatever, I don't need any arguments. I can just show people, this is what it is. It's out there. It's living. It's real. It's doing its thing. It can get a lot better. And so that was my goal. And that was kind of how I attempted to go at it.
Wow, that's brilliant. So you said so many things that I find really profound. You've spoken about how that you had this idea for 10 years and you started working on it 2 years ago. And I want to ask you, how did you survive? How did you keep this idea alive? Because I know of many potential creatives who have ideas that have been there for many years, and because of that, lack of the wherewithal, be it the experience, be it the knowledge, be it the capital, but there's just some wherewithal that they lack at that moment. That idea stayed for years, and finally they just lost touch of that creative side of themselves. So how did you keep the flame on fire? How did you keep fanning the flame of your creative side, even when you were not actively working on that idea?
I had lots of ideas, and I think a lot of creatives have tons of ideas, maybe too many. And so I found myself trying something and then getting down the rabbit hole on something and then, learning but eventually kind of dropping it because it was too complex and I found this pattern again and again. I would drop something because it was too complex. And so when I got to be, that was like 30 something. I've thought, okay, I'm in my 30s, right? Okay, playtime is over. Let's figure out what I'm doing wrong here, because I don't seem to have made any progress on any of these different things. And I realized that's the pattern I was falling into. I would, and that's okay. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do when you're younger. You're supposed to explore.
Yeah.
So, and I realized, well, there is an idea I have that I feel like I can see the end from the beginning. I can see it all. I mean, it's got nuance and it's got some complexity that I'll have to work through. I understand that, but it's not like there's not this huge question mark somewhere. I can see all of it. And that was Satori. And so it was realizing, kind of having a self-introspection and realizing that this is the idea that I can see the end from the beginning on. So why don't I commit to this one idea, not be, dragged around by other ideas, but just focus and just do this one until it's done. Because I think it was probably my best idea and it was the one I could understand the most. And so I thought, well, it's a no-brainer, why not? I've been wanting to do this for decades, so let's just do it.
Wow. So when you say you can see the end from the beginning, like, what do you really mean? Because for me, what I know is that sometimes you can't really know how this thing will end. So how do you mean when you say you can see the end from the beginning as far as your idea is concerned?
Well, a lot of ideas, they come to us as feelings at the beginning, and then they kind of formulate a little bit and then a little bit more. And so for this example, when I was, back in 2014, I'm working on this first implementation of this idea. And I think, well, if I can bake it into the predictive algorithm, then it'll just flourish, right? I mean, then magic. And I could never get it baked into the algorithm. So I had to just step back. I was like, well, I don't know how to do it then. So I feel like it had kind of a beginning, like, okay, I got to do this one thing, bake it into this algorithm, and then magic will happen. I can't really see how that will work, but it should manifest this network, and that would be great, right? And so I think in the early days of an idea or an inspiration or something, it's usually like that, where you have like the first step or something, but then it's a big question mark. And then you think, well, maybe it'll grow into, what I think this idea would be. But once I had a little more experience and could see it better, I could see all the different pieces that needed to come together, and I could see how they fit together. And there was no big question mark, I mean, I can't predict exactly how it's going to be or how it works, but I can basically say, well, it's got this component and that works with this one, and this is how they work. And because they work this way, that means we can bring in this other component. And so I can kind of see the end from the beginning is the way I think of it. There's no huge, okay, so the end by this definition is getting to MVP, getting to a prototype, getting to, saying this is a real thing. It's not the best version of this. This is the simplest version of this idea, but it works. And it's built in such a way that it can grow. And what it's going to grow into, that I don't know exactly, right? Like that I don't know. I can see my goal, the fruition of my basic first immediate goal from the beginning. So, yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. Now, can you tell me about what you understand by the philosophy of creativity?
Yeah, I've thought a little bit about this. I've wondered sometimes if the ideas that we think that we develop, they seem to just come to us, in a sense. It seems almost like that's just as accurate a way to think about it as us actually developing it, like we own it. But I kind of think that it's just as accurate to say that ideas own us. Like when I think of Satori and what I'm doing, I see myself as working for the boss, Satori, working for this thing that could be potentially bigger than me. So I don't know. It puts you in kind of a position where you have to be a good steward of the idea, because, if you kind of see it that way, then you might personify the idea and say, well, if I don't do a good job at this, he's going to go somewhere else. He's going to give this idea to somebody else and they're going to make it big. So I work for Satori in order to pay it the respect that it deserves, I think. That's kind of how I view the situation.
Wow, that's an interesting perspective to see that ideas own us. I believe that the world is ruled by ideas, but not just ideas, but people who take an idea and follow through with that idea and give that idea an expression. Everything that we see in the world today was once an idea in the mind of someone. We have what we have today in the world because someone allowed those signals to come into their mind and capture the signals in form of pictures in their imagination, and then translated those pictures into real form by working on those pictures and working on those ideas. I also believe that, and I think you also have this philosophy that ideas, if we do not capture them, someone else may capture them. The ideas that are calling onto us to gain expression through us, if we do not respond to that call, if we do not catch the signals of those ideas, someone else may catch them. And I believe there are millions and even billions of ideas that have missed their original authors because the potential authors of those ideas have either been, distracted or not focused or not sensitive to those signals. I also believe that most of the things we are seeing in our world today could have happened 100 years ago if the minds of people were developed enough to capture those ideas. I believe the Facebook, the Amazon, the YouTube, all these fantastic innovations we see around in the world of tech and even in other spaces could have been possible hundreds of years ago if the minds of people had been exposed enough to capture those signals. What do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely right. Like we live in the mind space of those that have come before us and made these ideas come to fruition. So I think you're totally accurate. Have you heard of Rupert Sheldrake? Is that who I'm thinking of? I think so. You heard of Rupert?
No.
So he's kind of a scientist type, but he's on the fringe. And he says, if we look everywhere around us, we see something morphogenetic field or something like that. I don't remember the exact term. But he says, if something novel happens in existence, then it seems to make that pattern more likely to occur in the future. So they did these things where they said, okay, we're going to take these mice or, some rodent, and we're going to have them learn a maze, and we'll do this in, like Australia or something. And so they learned the maze. They took X amount of time to learn it. And, then they could do the maze. And then they said, we're going to take a different set of mice that are the same breed, as similar as possible to those mice. And we're going to take them in. It was like across the world. It was like England. We're going to take them over in England and we're going to do the exact same experiment. And we're going to measure how long it takes for them to learn that exact same maze. And they learned it faster and significantly faster. And so his kind of theory, like he uses that as an example of when something is learned, when a pattern is instantiated, in this case, the pattern of that maze in the rat's brains, when a pattern is instantiated, it has a tendency to happen again and again and again and again. So if you've got an idea, it feels like as soon as you have that idea, it has a tendency to manifest in the world somewhere eventually, So if you don't develop it and use it and respect it and work for it and love it, somebody else will. And so it's going to find its place. This idea of memes, we live in the internet age. So when we say meme, we think of like a funny picture or something. But the term was being used back in the 70s or whenever to describe how ideas are like living organisms and they mutate and they change, but they're always trying to find expression. And that's what they're trying to do. And so, yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, on the subject of going from idea to creation, what were the challenges you faced? I know there was the part of you having to work on this idea alone during your weekends and nights. Wasn't that like a lonely lifestyle? What happened to your social life? What happened to your family life? What other challenges did you experience in going from idea to creation?
It was a challenge, I suppose. Yeah, it took sacrifice. There's other things I'd like to do that, are more enjoyable at the moment than sitting down and programming. But I found that as I would make progress, it felt really good, because I could see I was getting closer to my goal, and it's always going to take longer than you expect. So if you go in knowing that, I read a book by, I don't remember his name. He's the writer that wrote Ender's Game. But he wrote a book on how to write books.
Hey, have you ever desired to write a book or become a published author, but somehow you don't know what to write about, you don't know what to call what you write about, you don't know how to write what you want to write about, or you don't know how to finish what you started writing about? Maybe you started writing and you're stuck for years, or maybe you even finished writing, but you don't know what to do with your manuscript, or you don't have a publisher. No one wants to give you a publishing contract, and so you are stuck. Well, I've got good news for you. There are 8 things stopping you from writing your first book, and I have a free training that will help you overcome all of these 8 things holding you back. And once you're able to overcome these 8 things, you'll be able to write your first book in 30 days. Yes, you heard me right, 30 days. After you watch that training, you're going to get my free ebook on your email that will show you how to write a book profitably, even if you hate writing or you don't know what to write, where to start, or how to finish. If you're tired of postponing your desire and dream to become a published author or to write your first book, click the link below this video, register for this training, and watch it right away.
And I remember reading that as a teenager, and he said, okay, number 1 rule, here's the first thing you got to know. You're not going to write this book once. You're going to write it like 100 times. You're going to write it, and then you're going to throw it away, and you're going to write it again and again and again and again. And programming is like that. As soon as you do something, there's a new way, a better way to do it. You're going to learn that you didn't do it right the first time. It could be changed. It could be altered. It's always a continual updating, changing iteration. So I guess the first, the way to combat that challenge of I'm going to have to sacrifice for this is to know that it's going to take longer than you expect, and you're going to have to do it many more times than you expect, and that's okay. But because every time you're going to make it better and better, you're evolving this idea into existence. So I think that was the first thing. Another thing that probably helps with making that kind of a sacrifice is kind of trying to stay consistent. So there's a book out there called The Slight Edge. I don't think it's very popular. I haven't heard of very many people who have listened to it or read it, but The Slight Edge is kind of gimmicky, but it describes a very important principle, I think. And it's this idea that if you're consistent at something, you set yourself up, you're doing it every day, it's in a routine, or, it's just a little bit at a time, but you're consistent. That little effort put into whatever it is tends to just snowball over time. So even though it might look like it's not linear, it's not additive, it's multiplicative. So even though it might feel like, well, this is going to take, 100 years to finish. If you're consistent and you just do a little bit over time, things start to get attracted to that pattern, that habit. It starts to take more and more energy. It starts to grow. And so you can have exponential experience with just a very consistent, even if it's a small amount of effort. And so that's one thing I try to do, even if I wasn't feeling like programming. I program for my job. I don't want to continue to program sometimes. So I would say, well, okay, I'm going to take tonight off. But before I do that, is there any little tiny thing that I could do for Satori today? And I would spin it up and see something in the UI that I could fix. Oh, that could look better. I'll just do that right now. And so I think as long as you try to remain as consistent as possible, then it snowballs over time. And another thing, probably the last thing that kind of, I don't know, that I would probably lean on as being able to motivate me to make that kind of a sacrifice would be like, I read the book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. That's a popular one.
That came to mind too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The takeaway that I got from it was, if you want to, so he studied outliers. He's a statistics guy. So he studied outliers and he said, what makes the difference between success and outlier success, like great success? And which you could also extrapolate to be like, well, what's the difference between no success, just, baseline, and having some moderate success, right? And so you can probably apply it to both of those questions. But the takeaway that I got from it was, it comes down to basically two things. Maybe you could call it three things, but it comes down to hard work. You're probably going to have to work, right? It's probably going to take some amount of work. Maybe it's a lot, maybe it's a little, but it's going to take some of your effort, probably. And it's going to take luck. So, for crazy outliers, it probably takes a lot of luck. Like, he goes in and tells the story of, he does lots of stories, but one was Bill Gates, if I recall. He said, okay, so this guy was born at just the right time, so that he was learning how to program right when it was early stages of computing. And as a teenager, like as a 12-year-old, he had access to like a university computer at nights or something. So he could, how many 12-year-olds on the planet had access? It was like 3, probably. Like, come on. So he had an extremely good position when it comes to just getting lucky. And he was a hard worker and he was smart and he was all about computers and, he was the right person to be in that position. So he had both of those elements to become an outlier. And so I kind of thought, well, I don't need to be an outlier, but these two principles probably apply to any amount of success. You probably have to work hard and to see so that when you're in a position that's good, you can take advantage of it. You can be the person that can take advantage of that kind of position, that kind of luck. So, with those kind of thoughts, and also, we don't live very long. Maybe a 20-year-old or a teenager is not really thinking about, their life's work or something like that, a legacy or what matters. But you don't live very long. So if you can do one thing out there that matters to a lot of people, that's probably, pretty rare. So, why don't go for it? If it's kind of what you want to do, I kind of feel like that's a good idea. It gives your life meaning. Yeah. I think all of those things kind of kept me going.
Wow. Wow, that's so amazing. And I like what you said about the fact that these other great people and outliers, they had an element of luck on their side. And I also believe that we can create our own luck. And if we are able to, tap into that side of ourselves, you just don't know when you get to that tipping point. And once you get to that tipping point, everything changes, right? And you don't know when it will come. So you just want to hold on to that vision, hold on to that dream, navigate the challenges and just keep at it, keep creating the future that you want to feature in with your idea. And before you know it, you get to that tipping point and everything takes off and it becomes bigger than you. And then you become the next genius, the next success. The world is waiting to hear about. Everybody now wants to hear your story, right? But it's these little things, these little, bits and pieces of consistency here and there that actually takes us there. And that is such a profound way to look at it. I think that this is a very good way to talk about it. I don't know if you have any other, final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we bring today's discussion to a close.
That tipping point is kind of what the slight edge talks about a lot. That it eventually gets to a point where, and you don't need, you don't need the whole world to fall in love with your thing in order to be a success, or, you don't need a vast amount of attention. You just need some. And, some people can be touched by your idea, and that's probably good enough for most. I mean, who knows? I don't know what Satori's going to do, but if it's just good for a group of people, and everybody else doesn't know about it, that's okay. So I don't know. Just being happy with success and finding joy in the journey, and yourself, right? Like sometimes you're going to feel like I did this. I went through cycles where I was, in it hours every waking moment. I was, and other cycles where I was just kind of, maybe not today very much, but trying to stay as consistent as possible, gets you through those times so that you don't, let all the momentum go, so I think that's great.
Wow. Thank you so much. And if you're listening to this, you're sitting in your car, you're lying on your bed, you're watching us on YouTube or whatever platform you're hearing this, I want to let you know one thing. Whether you're writing code, whether you're building an app, whether you're writing a book, whether you're creating a business, whether you're starting a movement, whatever you're doing, whether you're creating a machine and you want to land it on Mars, whether you're creating a new nation, you're creating a new philosophy, you're creating a new thought process that you want people to plug into, to connect with, the process is the same. The creative process is the same. The philosophy of creativity applies in going from idea to creation. And that's generally the reason why I bring people from different walks of life to this show, because I want you to be able to see those patterns that whether you're a programmer, whether you're a business tycoon, whether you're a startup, whether you're a writer, the creative process remains the same. The principles of creativity are applicable, and I believe that you found some nuggets in our conversation today. Thank you so much, Jordan. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your journey with us and with the audience. It was such a fantastic way to, see the world through your eyes. And I believe that maybe sometime in the future we'll also get to catch up again and have more conversations. And I wish you all the best on your idea, your work, on your invention. I look forward to seeing all the big things that you're going to accomplish with what you're doing. To my audience out there listening, thank you once again for tuning in. I'd like you to share this with someone out there that needs to ignite their creativity. Share this with someone out there that needs that burst of inspiration to keep at it. Share it with someone out there that's almost at the brink of giving up on their idea or taking their idea to the grave without manifesting it, so that they too can be able to birth their ideas in form of brain children. share this with them, talk to them about it, and together we can make the world a better place. See you next week. Until then, have a good one. Bye-bye.